What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, September 18th, 2020. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot to talk about today. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. We're going to do news until we run out of news. Then we'll open the phone lines for your comments and questions. And of course, in hour number 2, we're going to have the lovely Lady Claire with her unique perspective on the world here. Now, yesterday was Constitution Day. And I don't know, I guess the rest of the year we don't pay attention to it. But Trump gave this speech in which he really ripped into current educational trends, regarding race and literally teaching the younger generation to hate this country and what it stands for. And it was a really good speech. And he defended American history against the left's subversive cultural poison. No country will ever survive when its own citizens hate it, which is why the left has spent decades teaching school children to do just that. President Trump on Thursday delivered a defiant speech against the far-left cultural revolution, trying to tear down America's history, culture, and institutions. And he made mention about all the statues and monuments that are being torn down to try and erase our history, to erase things that, frankly, a lot of people are very, very proud of here. So the president's speech was addressed to the White House Conference on American History, gathered at the National Archives Museum in Washington, D.C. The president repeatedly attacked the lie that the riots of the past summer were peaceful protests aimed solely at police brutality. The mobs that are ripping down statues of Junipero Serra, Francis Scott Key, and Thomas Jefferson are motivated by something far more sinister, a desire to burn all of American society to the ground and found a completely new country ruled by themselves amid the ashes. Now, Jerry Harris, who's a celebrity Joe Biden surrogate, has been arrested by the FBI and charged with the production of child pornography. The person is known by the friends they keep here. And apparently Harris had sex with and solicited explicit pictures from minors. Now, Harris was featured in the Netflix docuseries Cheer as a cheerleader, had his home raided by the FBI on Monday as part of an investigation into whether the star had been soliciting sex from minors. Boy, it's a bad week for Netflix. They've got this, they've got Cuties, and the controversy over that one. There is a video out there in which Joe Biden is telling his supporters at a gathering, if you elect me, your taxes are going to be raised, not cut. And the camera is showing the look on Joe's supporters. You can see they're saying, wait a minute, that's not what we want to hear. Taxes are already way, way, way too high. So that was a little bit of a goof. Now, of course, he's being accurate. Democrats love to raise taxes. They always have. There are ideas that all the money of the country should be going through their hands, and that you will be grateful for what little portions of it they hand back to you. Now, President Trump has retweeted a video of Joe Biden giving his speech on global warming while Antifa burns America to the ground behind him. And it does seem rather odd for Biden to be going on about global warming when there are so many immediate crises to be dealing with, including the coronavirus. Now, Kamala Harris arrives in Milwaukee in Florida, but like Trump says, no one likes her and no supporters were there to greet her. That's got to be sending a message. Paul Joseph Watson wrote an article saying, how could the Democrats come up with the two most unlikable candidates for president and vice president? Are they really that sure they're going to be able to steal the election? Now, New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said liberals like herself likely can push Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden in a more progressive direction if he's elected in November. They're basically telegraphing the fact that if you think you're voting for Biden because of what Biden believes in, it doesn't really matter because they're going to change him once he's in office. In a recent interview, the firebrand former bartender expressed optimism that progressive Democrats can likely push Biden further to the left if he's elected president. As a self-described socialist, Ocasio-Cortez's remarks come after reports that Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders reportedly has said he does not believe Biden is appealing enough to liberal voters. Ocasio-Cortez endorsed and campaigned with Sanders during the primaries. Okay, James Comey will testify to the Senate probe on the Trump-Russia investigation, according to Republican Chair Lindsey Graham, calling it a day of reckoning. But apparently Mueller is saying he is too busy to attend. Now, yesterday we had a story where it made it sound like Lindsey wasn't trying to call him, but apparently that is not accurate. It's just Mueller is simply not going to show up, and we'll have to see what Lindsey Graham's going to do about that. Michigan is joining Pennsylvania with an extension for the time for mail-in ballots to be counted. A Michigan judge ruled today that the state must accept ballots that arrive within 2 weeks of the election as long as they are postmarked by November 2nd. Now, it's very easy to fake a postmark. You know, there's no security on a postmark like there is on stamps and various other things. You can do it with a mimeograph machine. Anyway, the judge also said the state, which was decided by just 10,000 votes in 2016, cannot restrict who can help voters return an absentee ballot, which means they've opened the door to ballot harvesting. Republicans are launching a massive operation called Commitment to America to take back the House of Representatives and to remove Nancy Pelosi. And now we're close enough to the election where people are really starting to pay attention to what's going to happen in the House and the Senate. And the Democrats are out there drooling because there are apparently some sitting senators who are facing stiff opposition from Democratic challengers. And the Democrats are thinking they're going to hold on to the House and they're going to flip the Senate, they're going to take the White House, and then liberal nirvana will be upon us all. Turning to the riots and the protests that are going on over there, over at thefederalist.com, they have a story about a study that says, contrary to corporate media narratives, up to 95% of this summer's riots are linked to Black Lives Matter activism, according to data collected by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. The data also shows that nearly 6%, or more than 1 in 20 of U.S. protests between May 26 and September 5th, involved rioting, looting, and similar violence, including 47 fatalities. These are not peaceful protests. Now, ACLED is a nonprofit organization that tracks conflict across the globe. Its U.S. project that collected the summer protest data is supported by Princeton University. The project spreadsheet, collating tens of thousands of data points, documents 12,045 incidents of U.S. civil unrest from May 26, 2020 to September 5, 2020. May 26th is the day after George Floyd's death in police custody with enough fentanyl in his system to have died of an overdose if police had never touched him. Meanwhile, FBI Director Christopher Wray yesterday said white supremacists make up the largest share of racially motivated terrorists in the United States. This is absolutely outrageous, and it's not true. Wray made these statements during testimony before the House Homeland Security Committee. More incidents of attacks on police. A car pulled up to troopers in Arizona, and these 2 Arizona Department of Public Safety troopers were fired on in apparent ambush attempt in Phoenix. Police are on a manhunt for the driver after apprehending the shooter. DPS officials say the 2 troopers were uniformed but sitting in an unmarked car when another car pulled up to them and honked the horn. A teenager that was sitting in the passenger seat exited the vehicle and fired at the troopers with an assault rifle. And you can count on the Democrats to make a big deal about that last fact. This is the 3rd attack on police officers in a week. Now, Trey Gowdy is out there chastising Nancy Pelosi. Yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi finally condemned violent protesters from the House floor. But according to former House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, it only took 10,000 arrests, $2 billion in property damage, and a couple of cops fighting for their lives to finally figure out the numbers weren't on her side. You can be 100% behind law and order and law enforcement, or you can be, in her case, 100 days behind them. Okay. Rural Springfield, Missouri. Public schools are teaching kids critical race theory, including that saying MAGA and calling the cops is white supremacy. Now, Springfield Public Schools has an Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and the school district is pushing critical race theory to kids in the area to get them to hate their heritage, their state, and the country they live in. And if you disagree with their racist indoctrination, that makes you a racist too. Now, interestingly enough, there's a viral video making the rounds. This is out of Tethasta.com. There's a viral video making the rounds featuring anti-Black Lives Matter protesters in various stages of discussion about the movement, what it means to be Black in America, and what Black Lives Matter really means as a concept. The vast majority of Black people don't like Black Lives Matter because it makes the image of Blacks as a whole look bad. And unfortunately, people paint with a broad brush. We try and avoid that around here. But it's like Blacks who don't like affirmative action because they get their jobs on the strength of their merits and their abilities. And they don't want people thinking they only got the job because of the color of their skin. Now, Herschel Walker is out there challenging pro athletes, saying that the Black Lives Matter founder is a trained Marxist, and this is who you're supporting. So Heisman Trophy winner and former NFL star Walker, who spoke at the 2020 Republican National Convention to support Trump, released a video in which he again threw down the gauntlet to owners of professional sports teams. Now, Newt Gingrich is still making the rounds here, talking about the way he was silenced on Fox News when he tried to bring up the fact that George Soros is funding a lot of these riots and protests. And he's out there saying it seems like there's suddenly a movement in media to silence anyone who speaks out against George Soros, and specifically his funding of radical prosecutors seeking to change the criminal justice system by simply ignoring certain crimes. This happened to me personally this week when I was being interviewed on Fox's Outnumbered. When I brought up Soros's plan to get pro-criminal anti-police prosecutors elected across the country, two of the show's participants interrupted me and forcefully asserted Soros was not involved. Meanwhile, according to a story that we have over here in thinkaboutit.news, George Soros has 200 organizations to attack America. And he's responsible for overthrowing and destabilizing countries all over the world. And now he's turned his attention to this country. With nearly 200 organizations that have launched attacks on Trump and or conservatives, the chaos and anarchy we see all over the country probably won't stop anytime soon. Dr. Rich Swear has published the entire list of organizations that Soros funds, and if he's funding it, you can be sure there's a globalist, leftist, and socialist motive behind it. Now, here is a story we have to take with a grain of salt. It came out of Natural News, but a Twitter account that claims to represent various chapters of Antifa admitted in a tweet that some of the wildfires blazing across Oregon were deliberately started by protesters in order to, quote, draw attention to the climate emergency, end quote. The Scarsdale, New York Antifa Twitter account, which one Abrupt Earth Changes commenter contends is fake, says that it and several other Antifa chapters across America collaborated to ignite fires throughout Oregon to show that climate change and global warming are real. Not very effective if people know the fires are being set. Law enforcement in Oregon have likewise confirmed that Antifa terrorists are indeed lighting fires in protest, and in some cases using advanced methods and tactics to accomplish their agenda. During a recent meeting of the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners, law enforcement stated that Antifa is staging full gas cans all across the country, which includes the southern portion of Portland, in order to light more fires in the coming days and weeks. Now, Biden had a little bit of a rhetorical jumping the shark, and he was basically last night talking about the coronavirus, and he actually claimed on Thursday night that President Donald Trump was personally responsible for every single person who's died from the coronavirus, which originated in China. Even the Washington Post called him on this one, saying there's no data to support that. That even if Trump had done everything that the Democrats think he should have done back then, remember hindsight is 2020, even if China had been fully forthcoming, people still would have died. Countries whose response to the coronavirus has been called exemplary still had deaths. But Biden is out there saying that Trump is responsible for the 197,000 deaths from coronavirus here in the United States of America. That is definitely jumping the shark here. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci said Wednesday he expects the COVID-19 vaccine to be fully tested and proven safe and effective well before the end of 2020. I would still put my money on November, December, Fauci said at a Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute panel, according to CNN. Now, Donald Trump just had a news conference talking about the vaccine before he makes his way to Minnesota, where he's saying that there are 3 vaccines that they think are probably going to work, and they've already started manufacturing them in bulk, waiting for the FDA to approve them, or to approve at least one of them. And they're going to have 100 million doses ready by the end of the year and enough doses for everybody in the country by next April. Now, Nevada is now the 7th state to quietly reverse their decision to block hydroxychloroquine prescriptions for COVID-19. Physicians in Nevada can now once again prescribe HCQ as they deem necessary. Down in Australia, where things are getting really draconian, the Victorian government is pushing a new bill to detain conspiracy theorists, anti-lockdown protesters, and their families. The Victorian government will debate a new bill in the state parliament this week that would hand authorities the power to forcibly detain conspiracy theorists and people suspected to likely spread coronavirus, such as anti-lockdown protesters and their close contacts. Crime is definitely showing up here. Los Angeles County Public Health Director Dr. Barbara Ferrer was recorded saying the country's largest county would not reopen its schools until after the election, once again betraying that the whole coronavirus issue is being politicized by the Democrats. Anyway, Dr. Ferrer said we don't realistically anticipate that we would be moving to either Tier 2 or reopening K-12 schools at least until after the election in early November. Ferrer said in a conference call with school administrators and medical staff, a recording of which was played on KFI's John and Ken show. Her comments led the California radio show hosts who obtained the recording to speculate about why she chose to use the general election instead of some other day like Halloween as a target date, and whether the county health department and schools were trying to manipulate public opinion in favor of the Democrats. Of course, that's what they're trying to do. Of course, that's what they're trying to do. All right, Mayor Bill de Blasio has once again delayed the reopening of in-person classes at New York City public schools just 3 days before they were set to resume. Instead of sending all of its 1 million students back to the classroom on Monday, September 21st as planned, the city will now welcome them back on a rolling basis. Preschools will reopen next week, followed by schools serving students in kindergarten through 5th grade on September 29th, then middle and high schools on October 1st. Okay. Even with internal Democratic pressure, Pelosi is doubling down on no to the new corona bill. Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic House is creating a really hard time for lawmakers to pass the COVID relief bill. I think one of their motivations is they don't want that extra money to show up in your bank account before the election day, because that's going to make you feel warm and fuzzy about Donald Trump. But Pelosi is refusing to accept any offer given to her by Republican nominees. She will only accept her exact request for the deal. In the meantime, pressure, even from within the Democratic Party, is growing against her stubbornness. There are Democrats that are facing uphill battles for their election, and they're thinking that Pelosi's saying no is going to work against them. And yes, it probably will. Moderate Democrats like Representative Stephanie Murphy of Florida said members are starting to push the leadership to do something. Story coming out of Great Britain, government could use emergency powers to give the public an unlicensed vaccine with midwives and soldiers trained to administer it. And ministers would utilize regulations to bypass EU laws if a vaccine becomes available prior to the end of the Brexit transition agreement on December 31st. Even if a possible vaccine has not been passed by European medicine watchdog, the government would push it due to the threat the pandemic poses. And of course, they're still out there saying that the pandemic is going to have its second wave as the temperature falls here in the Northern Hemisphere this winter. Okay, apparently contact tracing is failing in a lot of the states. And apparently in a lot of areas like Arizona, the coronavirus is so ubiquitous, contact tracers have been unable to find a fraction of those infected. In Austin, Texas, the story is pretty much the same, just as it is in North Carolina, where the state's health secretary recently told state lawmakers its tracking program was hiring outside workers to keep up with a steady rise in cases, as a number of other states have done. Cities in Florida, another state where COVID-19 cases are surging, have largely given up tracking cases. We need to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and once again, a friendly nudge that Republic Broadcasting Network needs you. And as that little promo that we just played asks, what would you do without Republic Broadcasting? Go back to Fox News, go back to CNN, go back to CBS, go back to PBS or NPR? I don't think so. And we do need your help. And again, thanks to those of you who've been donating, because some donations have come in. Could be more, could be faster. I hate to sound ungrateful, but that's the absolute real truth. We're in a very, very rough patch right now. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines now, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from Terrell in South Carolina. Hello, Terrell. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
I heard on WION WION News. I recently became a subscriber. Actually, I like their quote unquote unbiased opinion. Everyone has someone in their pocket, but they're pretty cut and clean when they speak of the relations between China and us and all that. But anyway, Taiwan got some weapons from us, and we're going ahead and arming India, and China's aggression is at both. So it seems like you're right. We are ramping up, but this is like pretty bold, you know?
Yes.
Can you remind me of Fast and Furious about was that gun running, and that us was selling guns to like a foreign nation or something like that?
No, Fast and Furious is we were arming one of the Mexican drug cartels. The official reason given was we were going to trace how guns were traveling through the cartels to try and backtrace and find where they were coming from. But the reality is that we were arming one of the cartels to wipe out its competition so that drug prices could go up, and the cut received by U.S. interests would thereby grow.
Taiwan's small enough to be a cartel. However, the arming of I guess that's, I mean, you know, business as usual, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I want to see if there's anything on why, like, what's the end game? Are we like ramping up sides right now? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, everybody's picking sides. Everybody's deciding which side they're going to come in on when the big shooting really starts.
Outstanding. Okay, well, thank you for your time, Mike. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you very much for the phone call. Getting back to the international news, Russia has criticized Turkey for its failure to fulfill its obligations under a bilateral ceasefire agreement on Syria's northwestern Idlib province, where the two countries back opposing sides. Despite the success notched up in the fight against international terrorism on Syrian soil, the situation there is far from being stable. This from Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova to a news briefing yesterday. The terrorist groups of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and Guardians of Religion organization have entrenched themselves in Idlib. The activities of these outfits have been partially restrained as a result of deployment of Turkish forces in the Idlib de-escalation zone and joint Russian-Turkish patrols on the M4 highway at the section between Sarakib and Jizr al-Shugur, she added. Ankara is nevertheless delaying to honor its commitments under the latest Turkish-Russian deal concluded on March 5th. Okay, we're going to take another phone call from Al in Canada. Hello, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's Friday.
Hi. Yes.
I hope everybody's doing well. Claire's
Yes.
doing well, I hope.
Yep.
Great. As you know, I'm from Canada.
Yes.
And I donate to RBN, and I donate to your show as well. So I'd like to say that.
Thank you very much.
So, you know, like some of the people that call up here from the United States, they should be donating as well. Because, like you said, I mean, what's the alternative? All these liars.
Yes.
You know, and there's so many.
I'm not paid enough to lie.
Well, that's it exactly, right? I mean, and that's the thing too. Like some of these people, some of these talking heads on these shows, I don't watch them because I don't have programming. But you know, I know who they are. I know who these people are quite well, and you know, some of them are making millions of dollars a year.
They are huge
right?
amounts of money.
Like, for instance, yeah, like Dan Rather. I mean, what's he famous for lying about?
Which way Kennedy's head went from the headshot.
Bingo. You know, like we already know what the truth is. Anyway,
yeah.
So these debates that are supposed to be happening, I think, where do they start, Mike? October 10th?
No, the first debate is the 29th of this month.
Okay, yeah, that's even better. And
yes.
you know, like you said.
Okay, Al, I got to put you on hold. Al, I got to put you on hold. Okay, don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Al in Canada, and we're talking about, we're talking about politics and the debates, which are going to start on the 29th. Unfortunately, several states, in fact, I think more than 20 of them, are going to be sending out their mail-in ballots before the debate actually gets started. Now, 65% of likely voters have said the debates are a significant part of choosing who they're going to vote for. So maybe the people getting these mail-in ballots will hold off sending them in until after that first debate.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what they're mail-in. Do these people have to apply and send in some kind of verification that that's who they are in order to get these ballots?
No, in a lot of states, they're just mailing the ballots out to everybody that's on the voter rolls, whether they ask or not.
So they're literally just ballots.
Yes.
Right? To who, you know, to who may be concerned. Here's your ballot.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
dear occupant.
Yeah, dear occupant. Yeah. So the debates. So because of this COVID-19, there are going to be podiums, and I'm willing to bet if there are debates to begin with,
yes,
that are live, where actually Biden and Trump are on the same stage, there will be podiums, and
yes.
Donald Trump won't be roaming. I bet you he won't be able to roam around to see what's going on behind door number 1, or even to look in Joe's ear, because you and I both know that Donald Trump does not need an earpiece, and he definitely does not need to be reading from a teleprompter, because he actually sucks at that. He really does.
Yeah, he does. Well, Hillary
so
during
this is
one
going
of
to be
during 2016, the run up to that election, Hillary was caught using a teleprompter embedded in the top of the podium.
Yep. So if that were to happen, how would anybody know?
Well, we'll just have to keep a really close eye on, what's going on around Biden's podium.
Yep, and especially where his eyes are.
Yes.
And if you notice, when people are listening to something, when they have earpieces on, their whole facial expression changes.
Yes.
And even though that Joe's been in politics for 45 years plus,
yes,
he's still an idiot. So I think there are going to be these tells, and like this is the sort of thing that people should concentrate on, assuming there's going to be even live debates. What if they're live, Mike, where Trump's in one place and Biden's in another? I mean, it's going to be biased anyway, but I mean, how much worse can it get?
Well, I know that the moderators for all the debates are anti-Trumpers, and that's why Trump wanted to get Joe Rogan in there. And Joe Rogan is ready to do it, but it's not going to happen.
No, because Biden couldn't last, like 12 minutes, let alone 4 hours.
Yes.
It wouldn't be possible. No, he wouldn't be able to. All right, well, that's all I have, Mike. I appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to listening to some of the other callers. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to David in Boston. Hello, David. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. Michael, I saw Alex Jones showed. I don't watch the corporate news media, and I don't know the journalist name that interviewed George Soros, but Alex Jones played it today, and I've always been trying to provoke Jones to stop saying Soros is a Nazi collaborator. I try to get him to say that George Soros was a Hungarian Jew who collaborated with the Nazis. That makes
He's
it a lot
even
more
admitted
clear.
it on video. Soros has actually admitted he did that on a video interview.
Yeah. Alex Jones showed the whole thing today, where he has no remorse for selling out his co-religionists or anything. But of course, his real name is Georgi Schwartz. I call him Georgi Schwarzenegger. Okay, that's his real name. But,
yes.
Michael, are you familiar with the Ouroboros? Does that mean anything to you, the Ouroboros?
That's not the snake that's eating its own tail, is it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And just now, yesterday, of course, Newt Gingrich was censored on Fox when he brought up Soros. But then the late great Tex Maz wrote a book, The Holy Serpent of the Jews, and I started to read it, and it's been misplaced. Sometimes I have so many books I can't get my hand. They get misplaced. I still have it. I want to finish it, so I don't know if Tex. I used to use the expression if Tex connected all the dots, but I don't use that expression, Michael, anymore, connecting all the dots. What I'm doing is connecting all the stars of David. I don't connect the dots anymore. I just connect the stars of David. So I don't know. But anyways, Amazon binged Tex Ma's book, The Holy Serpent of the Jews. So I don't think Tex, because it would have been mentioned on talk radio before, I think. But I don't think Tex actually tied it in with George Soros. But anyways, Michael, this Soros, why he chose the name Soros is it's the Ouroboros spelled backwards. He took the last four letters of the Ouroboros. He fancies himself the son of Satan. This Ouroboros is the eternal serpent. That dominates the cosmos and everything. And Soros, the reason he took the name Soros is because if you spell Ouroboros backwards, start from the end and spell it backwards, it's Sorrow, not with no S, just S-O-R-O.
Yes.
And then to add to his ghoulishness, I guess in Hebrew, Michael, a sorrow is a urn full of ground bones, like when people are cremated, urns filled with cremated bone, cremated people, and everything. But at least I think we're smoking out Jones a little bit, because at least he's showing stuff like that now. That's very misleading to keep characterizing Soros as just a Nazi collaborator. I mean, there were German people in Germany that collaborated with the Nazis. In other words, Jones he's a very clever devil himself, that Jones, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows he's covering for Soros's Hungarian Jewish identity by calling him not just a Nazi collaborator, a Nazi, and so at least we're making progress with Jones. At least he had to. It came out that Soros, is a Hungarian Jew and everything, But it's very scary. And Michael, if sometimes I don't like to mention these different subjects, but let me just touch on this, Michael, maybe, and then maybe I can explicate it maybe in a call next week or something. But I'll tell you where where Americans are really getting screwed up, Michael. If I can take a shot at this Christian insanity.
Yes.
What's passing is Christian insanity. If you ask any of these pastors, if you ask any of these men of the cloth in America, is God in control? Oh, yeah, God's in control. So you further say, now, is God in control of everything? Oh, yeah, God's in control of everything. And so now, is God in absolute control of everything? Oh, yes, God's in absolute control of everything. Everything and everybody. Yes, of course. Well, there isn't a one that won't answer that way, Michael. But I'm going to tell you something, Michael. Even according to their own book, the scriptures, when Jesus was casting out spirits and healing people and casting out devils, the Pharisees accused him of doing it by the power of the devil, by Satan's power. And Jesus said to him, hey, if Satan cast out Satan, how will his kingdom stand? How will his kingdom stand? So the point I want to make, and maybe this is the beginning, Michael, but God, Jesus is not in complete and absolute control of everything. If he was in complete and absolute control of everything, he'd be in control. He'd be sitting on Satan's throne. No, make no mistake about it. The great Satan is the king of Satan's kingdom, not Jesus. Mm-hmm. There's two kingdoms. And because these phony preachers and this Christian insanity keep saying that Jesus is in complete absolute, no, he's not. The great Satan is in control of his. There's two kingdoms, and the great Satan is in control of his kingdom. King Jesus is in control of his kingdom, which he said is not of this world. But the great Satan is the king of this kingdom, which is of this world. You know, so if Satan casts out Satan, how will his kingdom stand? In other words, Jesus made it very clear that Satan has a kingdom on earth, and these phony, wicked preachers of Christian insanity, our government has been taken over, Michael, but through these secret satanic organizations and everything, because these phony Christian preachers and everything, they keep citing Romans 13, that all these satanic rulers, communists, that all that authority is from God. Romans 13, there is no power but of God. That's, I'm telling you that. You're on the right track by almost being an unbeliever, Michael, because that tells me that you recognize Christian insanity for what it is, you know. But I might talk a little bit more about this next week, Michael. But these preachers are dead wrong when they say, you know, God and Jesus is in complete and absolute control of everything. Make no mistake about it. The great Satan is in control of Satan's kingdom, and we're
otherwise, kingdom. God gets the rap for all the hurricanes and the floods and the, all the rest of that.
All the abortions, and it's ridiculous. That's why we call it Christian insanity. Michael, one last thing I just want to know if you're aware of. I'm friends with Charles Giuliani. He lives not too far from me. I've spent some time with him. I visited him several times and spent the day with him and everything. But are you familiar with I think you'd like it, the Renegade Radio, Charles Giuliani, and he used to be a talk show host of Republic Broadcasting. And he used to be a Christian, and he became disaffected by Christianity. And
yes.
Now he. Are you familiar with Renegade Radio and Charles Giuliani?
No, I'm not. I can't say that I am. No.
Oh, I think you're does Charles Giuliani, the talk show host, ring a bell with you?
No, that must have been before my time.
Oh, okay. Well, check it out. Charles Giuliani. It's Renegade Radio. .com or or you will get him. Charles Giuliani, just like Mayor Giuliani, America's mayor, so-called, but Charles Giuliani, Renegade Radio. It's very, very interesting. I think you would enjoy it, you know?
Well, I don't spend a lot of time on my atheism because it's not high on my list of things to do, but I'll certainly keep an ear out. I'm being told by our control room that it was years ago that Giuliani was on RBN, and he must have been leaving about the same time that I was coming on board.
Yeah, and he talks about all kinds of he talks about all kinds of things. He used to be a Christian, but now he's a higher critic of Christianity, you might say, or whatever. He's very critical of it, but he talks about all kinds of things. But just to reiterate, the call that I started with is maybe the top priority as far as. Check out the Ouroboros, and Soros fancies himself the son of Satan. He spells it, that Soros, he got it from, spelling it Ouroboros backwards, S-O-R-O-S from the back and everything. And Texas book was banned by Amazon, and here's Fox just silencing such a prominent American statesman like Newt Gingrich. So
yes,
he probably really is the son of Satan. But I'm not afraid of him, Michael, and I know you're not. You know, I'm not afraid of Satan or the son of Satan. Okay? All right, Mike.
all right.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Mike,
Have a
they
good
say
weekend.
In Alaska, they say Quiana. Quiana.
Well, I've never been to Alaska yet. I'd like to go and see the aurora up close as you can get, you know, being on the ground and everything. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the international news, Belarus is forced to shut down its state border with Lithuania and Poland, as well as to boost border controls with Ukraine, according to Lukashenko, calling on citizens of the three countries to stop their politicians and avert a hot war. He said, we are forced to shut down the state border with the West, particularly with Lithuania and Poland. We are forced to strengthen the state border with our brotherly Ukraine, to our great sorrow. In the last few days, we have been forced to build up a joint defense of the Union state with the Russian president and the defense minister. We also boosted the long-planned drills that are being held in West Belarus. Lukashenko noted, we also decided to hold them in 2 stages amid the difficult situation. I think we're going to see a war in Europe here very, very soon. All right. According to this diplomat here in the U.S., the Shia militant group has moved large caches of ammonium nitrate, which can be used to make explosives, from Belgium into France, Greece, Italy, and Spain. Now, Lebanon-based Hezbollah stores weapons, including large stockpiles of ammonium nitrate, throughout Europe, according to the U.S. State Department's coordinator for counterterrorism, Ambassador Nathan Sales. But the diplomat failed to provide any evidence or name any sources to back up his claims. I'll tell you, truth has become such a valuable commodity that our government is economizing it. All righty, over at Fort Hood, there's something very weird going over there, you know, almost like A Few Good Men. Fort Hood soldier collapsed during training, is 25 years old, was found dead with bruises and scratches after texting his fiancée that something was wrong, according to his family. See what happens there. Okay, getting into the economic news, wealth redistribution is a reality. The New Jersey governor proposes a tax penalty for the rich. The governor of New Jersey is threatening the economy of the state with a new tax that can scare away much of the upper class living in the Garden State. High-earning New Jersey residents will face an increased millionaire's tax under the new budget deal announced Thursday. The agreement, which Governor Phil Murphy touted as providing middle-class tax relief and fairness, also includes a $500 rebate for 2-parent families with at least 1 child and an annual income below $150,000. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles. Hello, Peter. Welcome to the show. Actually, we're coming up on a commercial break here, so just sit on the line. I'll come back to you as soon as we're done with the commercials. Meanwhile, Raytheon is getting ready to eliminate more than 15,000 jobs due to the airline downturn. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the phone call with Peter after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones here to Peter in Los Angeles. Hello, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to link a couple threads here, which almost all of them I've expounded on before individually and some of them collectively. But first off, with the mail-in voters, you know, guess where they're going to send all these mail-in ballots? They're going to send them to heavily illegal alien zip codes and
Yes.
heavily democratic zip codes, and we're going to get horribly. And of course, they'll just outright stuff them and fill them out and stuff them and all pre-filled out and do that as well. The second thing is, it's interesting to hear because you and I talked about how the COVID virus is being politicized, and now it's pretty clear to everybody what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So the COVID virus is being politicized, and guess who's doing it? It's the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Guess who is behind the mail-in ballots? The Democratic Party. Guess who is behind the Russiagate and behind the resistance to Trump's election in 2016. Guess who's behind Antifa and Black Lives Matter?
Yes.
And all the violence is going on, all the violence from the guy that went up and shot that Republican baseball game up back in 2017 to it's all been done. All this put to the opponent of Ilhan Omar, staffer that just got shot this week. All that is left on right violence.
Yes.
And then when you look at who funds these, and throw in there, by the way, the weaponization of the secret police, the FBI, the DOJ, the CIA, into the political process, which they've been caught red-handed doing, the weaponization of the FISA courts. And then you look at who funds Antifa, who funds Black Lives Matter, who funds the Democratic Party. 18 of the top 20 donors to Hillary Clinton, and I'm sure it will be that this way also, are leftist Jews, frankly.
Yes.
Look who funds them all. Look where all of this comes together every freaking time. And I will tell you that if Trump is far from perfect, and I'm going to hold my breath, but I'm definitely going to vote for the guy. But I would tell you that this forum that we are on now will be gone. If they will not, these guys that fund all this stuff, just like they don't want any criticism in the 28 states where they've made it illegal to criticize Israel, they'll make it illegal to it's almost illegal to criticize George Soros now, isn't it? You can't say it on CNN, that's for sure.
That's what they certainly showed Newt Gingrich yesterday.
Yeah, the former Speaker of the House wasn't allowed to discuss something which is a freaking fact.
All right, well, Peter... Peter, stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back as soon as we're done with station identification. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're finishing up a phone call with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, if you could pick up right where you left off.
Well, it's all these things come. There's a confluence at one spot, and it's the same people that own the central banks and control our currency, that own all the networks. That own our Congress and own our state legislatures enough that 28 of them have already to vote their own children's First Amendment rights away on behalf of these. There are enough of whores, and they'll take that money to vote their own kids' rights away. I noticed, by the way, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just came out today, and she said she was part Jewish. Do you see that? Just like Hillary. It came out and said she was part Jew. You got to be that, or you're not going to get elected, man. You're just not going to get elected. Everybody's got to go to Israel and genuflect over there and get vetted by them before nobody gets money on the Republicans or the Democrats unless they sell out to a foreign country. Who, by the way, won't allow you to say that our lives matter or all lives matter. They're not allowed to say that. And they're not allowed to say any of that stuff. That's all from them. So we have a stark chance. They will not, I guarantee you, these people will not tolerate this forum or any other forum that can just openly and frankly discuss what really is going on. And as bad as Trump is, he's at least stood up and he's just did the executive order, which they're disobeying, by the way, saying that no longer in the federal government, the military, are they going to have the white people are the root of all evil classes that we've been having for years. So that's their narrative. And at least he didn't go to war with Iran. I think that's probably why they're matriculating over to Biden, who, by the way, is out-Israeling even Trump, who's bad enough on it, but out-Israeling him. And also, he didn't go to war in a big way in Syria. And that must stick in their craw as well. And then this latest thing where ending the whites are the devil classes in all our, hey, listen, they don't like that at all. They won't stand for it. And so that is what it's come down to. And I'm not a supremacist at all. My family, my daughter is mixed. I'm a poor guy, by the way, with a daughter in college, and I'm retired. And I just sent $20 to you guys, by the way, because this forum is important.
That. Thank you very much.
But if this doesn't survive, it will not survive a Trump loss. Period.
Yes, I agree.
Maybe we won't. If there's 8 years, maybe we won't even as people. But at any rate, that's my spiel for today, Mike, and I'm sorry to go on so long.
All right, not a problem here, and thank you for the phone call. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and then we're going to turn the microphone over to the lovely Lady Claire, who, if you're on YouTube, you can see her sitting here, gorgeous creature that she is. Okay, we're going to go to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there. I watched the replay of that interview with Gingrich, and it was obvious as hell that somebody fired off an order immediately to Harris Faulkner for her to shut that down because she was caught off guard by that.
Yes.
So somebody, a producer back there, was obviously controlling that discussion, and then they didn't want anybody talking about Soros. And then that blonde twit, Marie Harf, had to chime in. I mean, she's just vacuous as an empty drum. But somebody back there obviously did not want them talking about George Soros. And again,
no.
From Harris's reaction, it was obvious that it caught her completely off guard because she's ordinarily a very even-handed, conservative individual, and for her to do that, that was unusual for her. So she had an order to do that.
I agree.
Anyway, Peter nailed it again as usual. You can't criticize Israel, and now you can't criticize George Soros. That goes to show you who's in charge. So
okay.
That's all I got to say about it.
All right, we'll have
watch that replay, and you'll see.
Yeah, we've got it posted to the front of whatreallyhappened.com right now. So, Kelly, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to go to Joe in Nome. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Our conversation on the 16th. I went to Ron Gibson's site where, because I like to watch the show there. It edits out the commercials. However, I was shocked to find our conversation was surgically removed from Ron Gibson's.
No, it wasn't surgically removed. It was a technical issue where YouTube will cut off our feed and we have to reestablish, and we keep trying to do the show through all of that. So nothing nefarious there. It's just one of those things that happens. You could check the live stream channel and see if it's there.
Okay, I will. Yeah. Anyway, it's not like I'm complaining or anything, but the guy that was talking about Giuliani's son of Satan,
yes,
I have to strenuously object.
Okay.
Because I resemble that remark more than anybody I know, because in the Bible, Satan's job is the prince of the principalities of the air, and it was my dad that took the Army Air Corps away from the Army and formed his own branch of the service.
Okay.
And he also took the Coast and Geodetic Survey away from the Department of Interior and formed his own branch of the service there called NOAA Corps. And he's the one that made El Nino a household word. He's also the one with Ralph Slutz at NIST. And my brother programmed those Cray computers that we gave to China under Obama administration. And yeah, he was also the back channel to the Russian Academy of Sciences. He was a director of polar programs for National Science Foundation. He was there talking for Ronald Reagan at Salt Joe,
you've got a really interesting family history here, but I am going to have to cut you off because this is Claire's hour, and I know she's got a lot of things to share with us. So, Joe, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines. So, Lady Claire, take it away.
Well, thank you, Mike. Always a joy to be here for the show. This article comes to us from antiwar.com. If you have never looked at it, it is an aggregate site, and they do have some op-eds that are extremely powerful, and this is one of them. And the title is September 14th, 2001, the day America became Israel. And this is written by Major Danny Serson, retired military. And it's a bit of hidden history that I did not know. And he talks about the rubble still smoldering at ground zero when the U.S. House of Representatives voted to essentially transform itself into the Israeli Knesset, or parliament. 19 years ago, 11:17 p.m., Washington, D.C. time on September 14th, 2001, when the People's Chamber approved the House Resolution 64, the authorization for the use of military force, AUMF, against those responsible for the recent attacks. Naturally, that was before the precise identities and full scope of, quote unquote, those responsible were known. So the resolution's rubber stamp was obscenely open-ended by necessity, but also by design. The Senate had passed their own version by roll call vote about 12 hours earlier, and the combined congressional tally was 518 to 1. Now, this lady and I have many, many reasons to agree to disagree, but I did not know this, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Only one representative, and that is Barbara Lee of California, cast a dissenting vote and even delivered a brief prescient speech on the House floor. And the major is saying it's really hard to watch and listen to all these years later as her voice cracks with emotion amidst everything that was going on. And what she said was, "I am convinced that military action will not prevent further acts of international terrorism against the U.S. This is a very complex and complicated matter." And she went on to state, however difficult this vote may be, some of us must urge the use of restraint. Our country is in a state of mourning. Some of us must say, let's step back for a moment and think through the implications of our actions today so that this doesn't spiral out of control.
As it has done.
God bless her. Now, and she goes on to say, now I have agonized over this vote, but I came to grips with opposing this resolution during the very painful yet very beautiful memorial service. As a member of the clergy said so eloquently, as we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. For her lone stance itself courageous, even had she not since been vindicated, she was getting insults and death threats so intense that she needed around-the-clock bodyguards for a time. And it's hard to be right in a room full of the wrong, especially angry, scared, jingoistic ones. Barbara, welcome to our
there,
world.
Done that, didn't buy the t-shirt.
The only thing was we didn't have the money for a bodyguard, and so we had to move the heck out of the state. And yet the tragedy is America has become one of those things we purport to deplore. The U.S. now boasts a one-trick pony foreign policy and a militarized society to boot. And what have we gotten out of this? Endless interventions, perennial policing at home and abroad, counterproductive military adventurism, government by permanent emergency fiat, and an ever more martial society. We've seen this movie before. In fact, it's playing out in Israel. Now, without implying that Israel as an entity is somehow quote unquote evil, theirs was simply not a path the U.S. needed or should have gone down. And yet we are seeing this played out again and again in foreign policy against countries like Iran, Venezuela, and China. And by these policies, we are pushing these people closer and closer together in military.
And away from us.
Yeah, and away from us. Is this really an intelligent outcome of U.S. foreign policy? And if we don't watch it, this country may well be at war with much of the rest of the world if they do not find a way of dealing with foreign policy other than at the barrel of a gun, folks. Indefinite detentions with no accusations or charges. Well, Israel does that to Palestinian prisoners all the time. And guess what? In U.S. operated black sites in Gitmo, this is already what Israel continues to do to alleged enemies of the state. And as I said, most generally, Palestinians. And speaking of Israel, Israel has just gone further round the bend in a rather paranoid way with a new rule in place for the bodies of killed or dying Palestinians, dead Palestinians. Now, this happened on the 2nd of September when the people in the Knesset figured that most Americans would be so focused on their Labor Day brats and beer that they wouldn't particularly notice, particularly the politicians. Well, apparently Gantz and his minions were entirely right, but they are carrying on a decades-old policy in an entirely new way. Now, any Palestinian who is killed or dies in jail, regardless of if they had any political affiliations or not, will have the bodies withheld from their families and are prevented from having a proper burial. Now, apparently, this has actually been approved by the Israeli Supreme Court. Head-scratching moment for me. Way to go, Israel. How they do love and continue collective punishment as a bargaining chip really has no equal in allegedly civilized
Well, there have been allegations of
societies.
organ harvesting from those bodies.
Yeah.
And, you know,
I know.
Israel's at the heart of a clandestine organ trafficking network that stretches across the globe. In fact, a few years ago, they arrested this rabbi on the East Coast who was part of this organ trafficking ring.
Yeah. But, you know, very sad, very sad. Also, a little closer to our former home, apparently Pearl Harbor Munitions Depot is expanding, and it very much concerns the residents.
Yes.
Now, it's a military plan to expand an existing Pearl Harbor Munitions Depot, and it's raised a lot of concerns that there hasn't been anywhere near enough information released to the public, considering that the depot was the site of a massive and deadly explosion 76 years ago. A 1944 explosion at the Navy's West Lock Annex left 163 guys dead and nearly 400 wounded in what is considered to this day Pearl Harbor's second worst disaster in terms of fatalities. Now, this was reported on Tuesday by the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. Now, a draft environmental assessment describes a new Army munitions storage complex at the annex within the Joint Base Pearl-Hickam. The project would be built in several phases starting in 2022. It would house 35 storage magazines and a range of support structures, enabling the relocation of existing Army munitions operations at Lualani Annex in Waianae. Now, the Navy is also building a new munitions facility at Westlock with 24 magazines to store Navy ordnance. And this has been awarded to NAN Inc. It's a $33 million contract last month to build the magazines by September 2022. Now, some community members said the public need to be a lot better informed about the work, and Mike, having lived there for over 20 years, I would say, heck yes. And one of the people, Poka Laonui of the Institute for the Advancement of Hawaiian Affairs, made the observation, the plan contains too much uncertainty and undisclosed materials. The public is unable to effectively participate in this process or to condone an action which it does not understand. And Mike, that person's absolutely accurate. And a full environmental impact statement should be conducted, Launui said. Well, this is sort of business as usual for the U.S. military in Hawaii. They're going to blindside local residents and move forward with these projects. Folks, the state of Hawaii is a bunch of islands. You can drive from one side, one end of Oahu to the other in about 40 minutes. So if something goes south here with a project of this nature and magnitude, the whole island's going to feel it, Mike.
Yes.
And there's a gentleman by the name of John Bond, who is an historian for Ewa Beach. And he says that a large area of Western Oahu could be vulnerable to an accident.
Absolutely.
And yeah, there are very major impacts to the Ewa West Oahu community. No hearings, no public presentations. When it's happening literally in their yards. And I love this. The Navy Facilities Engineering Command issued a statement saying the project would improve safety by providing state-of-the-art magazine storage and significantly reducing the movement of ordnance on Oahu roadways. And the statement later added, the safety of community residents is of the utmost importance, and explosive safety is calculated with extreme care and scrutiny. What does that even mean, Michael? Unless the residents of Oahu, at least close to where these facilities are being built, don't have a position paper to even look at, which is why I think they're kind of getting snowballed.
I would say that's exactly what's going on here.
Yeah.
And they're definitely, building up munition storage facilities here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
I just wish that the people of Oahu had a little better understanding of what was going to go down.
Well, let's face it, ever since the U.S. took over Hawaii, it's not like the locals have really had much of a say in their affairs.
No, they haven't had much control at all, And I'm going to start, because I know we've got a break coming up.
Yeah, about 20 seconds.
Yeah. I'm going to start the next segment with an article that comes from Sky News, which is a British news organization. And it's about the incredible number of Yemeni children who are facing famine and the reality that it's going to get worse.
Yes, it is. It probably is going to get worse. All right, we're going to take a break here for some commercials, and we'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. And again, a nudge that Republic Broadcasting is in the middle of a perpetual fundraiser. The postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. The network thanks you. And now back to the Lady Claire and your next story. You're finishing up the one that you teased before the commercial break.
Yes. Apparently in Yemen, more than 3 million people, including children, have been displaced. And the UN says, and I think, Mike, this is a very conservative estimate, more than 10,000 people have died in the last 18 months, 100,000 since 2015, and 80% of its population of 30 million are dependent on aid. And more than 200 million require urgent humanitarian assistance, almost half of them children, kids. There is little sign of an end to the conflict, and one could possibly consider it a proxy war, if you will.
Very much so.
With the U.S. supporting the Saudis, and we don't know how much support is real, but the Houthis being supported by the Shia Iranians. And the roots of this war go back to the Arab Spring, when you had huge crowds of protesters forcing the ouster of long-standing strongman Ali Abdullah Saleh. The transition to his successor, President Hadi, was plagued with problems. There was corruption, political infighting, economic failure, and they all strengthened the Houthi movement, which is Shia Islam, supported by Iran. So the Houthis took over the capital of Sana'a and ousted the Sunni government. Neighboring Saudi Arabia looked on in alarm at the rise of a group it sees as proxies for Iran, its long-standing enemies. The Saudis began their military intervention, and Yemen has become a proxy conflict. Sunni Saudi Arabia and its great Shia enemy, Iran, have used the war to play out their long-standing rivalry. And the article goes on to say that the Obama administration was a little more even-handed in treating Saudi Arabia and Iran. But the Trump administration has given the Saudis their full-blown support, and Saudi-Iranian enmity has only deepened. Well, Mike, here's the way I look at it. Okay, by supporting Saudi Arabia's onslaught against Yemen, the U.S. government, and tell me if I'm wrong here, because if I'm wrong, I need you to tell me. The U.S. government has positioned itself as an enabler of genocide against the Yemeni people.
Yes.
I mean, hello. If there was a War Crimes Anonymous, the government of the U.S. needs to start going to meetings now, and right the heck now.
Well, you know, the International Criminal Court is opening up an investigation into possible U.S. war crimes in several areas, including Yemen.
Yeah. And for that, they're being sanctioned.
Yes.
And Pompeo is threatening all sorts of terrible things.
Mhm.
And, you know, where I come from, pardon me for paraphrasing Gertrude Stein here, but a war crime is a war crime is a war crime.
Yes.
And it sells weapons to the Saudi government, prevents aid, desperately needed aid, from getting in, and advises the Saudi government about the best venues for attack. Now, what the Saudis are doing, indiscriminately shelling schools, houses, educational facilities, killing women,
Civilian infrastructure, basically.
children,
Yes.
infants, and the medically fragile elderly. Now, the water infrastructure has been bombed to smithereens, and it is possible that water has also been weaponized. And so cholera is now rampant and can very easily take a hold of already fragile people. Now, I really don't think that the U.S. government is thinking straight about this conflict at all.
Mhm.
And the reason why, Mike, is that unfortunately, President Trump has been, if you will, infected by the vision of the Israeli Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu,
Yes.
who constantly talks about Iran as being an existential threat. No. Financial, maybe. Existential, no, not at all.
No.
And what is going to happen is I see the only possibility for peace in the region, and I'm going to use an old parallel. Anyone out there remember the Three Stooges?
Oh, yes.
Manny, Moe, and Curly, okay? Yep. And where Moe used to just smack him across the face and say, that's stupid. What needs to happen for peace to happen in the region is we need to get Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Iran to a conference table, make sure that the plumbing is working, lock the doors until they come out with some basic confidence strengthening moves for all of these nations. Because as long as there is this horrible enmity between Iran and Israel, I mean, Israel's going to play it up to the hilt.
They are. We got to take a break here for a commercial, so hold that thought.
I will.
And we'll be back after these few words.
Okay.
Welcome back to our show. And Claire, if you could just sort of pick up where you left off before.
Yes, I will. As many of you who listen to the show or watch it know, I turned 71 this last May. And in looking at the entire situation in the Middle East, I think we have three leaders, if you will, who are listening to the voices in their own head. And when people do this as individuals, there are problems. When people in leadership in government situations do this, there are problems for the citizens of their countries. But I think we need to start looking at how Saudi Arabia and Israel can find ways to cooperate. I think we need to look for ways in which Iran and Israel can cooperate. Now, to the leadership of Israel right now, they have a tendency to want to keep their people in a situation of fear.
Constant fear.
Constant fear.
Keep them under control.
And maybe, I mean, fear is debilitating only to a certain point.
Yes.
And then people get tired of it.
You can literally burn the neurotransmitter that signals fear out of your brain. You literally can lose the ability to be afraid. And, you know, that's what governments are really afraid of.
Yes.
Is that they won't be able to keep us afraid of Iran, or a fear of Russia, or fear of China, fear of the coronavirus,
and
fear of the Brady Bunch coming back.
Yes, something like that. And it's very interesting because we have Persian Jews who've been living in Persia for generations, thousands of years. This, Mike, is the largest Jewish population outside of Israel.
Correct.
I mean, hello. And
I think one of the world's oldest synagogues, continuously operating synagogues, is in Iran.
Yeah. And when these people have been offered the opportunity to make aliyah, which is Hebrew for leaving to migrate to Israel, they're kind about it, but they've politely refused. So I would love to find someone with some geopolitical credibility left. And unfortunately, it's not anyone in the Trump administration I can turn my tongue to.
No, it isn't.
Has got to start working the phones and seeing what can be done to ratchet down the tensions here before we do have a regional war which escalates into a world war, if that might be possible.
Of course it's possible. In fact, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Everybody's locked and loaded and waiting for starting time.
Yeah. Now, I thought we could maybe bop over to Belarus, and there have been some significant developments there. Apparently, the president, Lukashenko, has closed the western borders, put the army on highest alert, and underlying repeated claims that protests are driven or stage managed, if you will, by the West. And I don't think Lukashenko was really wrong in that assessment.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. And the second thing is Ukraine and U.S. military exercises have begun as Russia is holding drills in Belarus. The U.S. and Ukraine launched a joint military exercise yesterday, 2 days after Russia began joint military drills with forces in neighboring Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm praying that that does not get nasty and that there isn't a miscalculation. And apparently, there have been some diplomatic standoffs which have stalled the EU's Belarus sanctions plan. And the EU lawmakers are saying that Lukashenko should not be recognized as Belarus president after November, because the actual end of his term, I believe, is 5 December.
Yes.
And Petras Ostrikavicius, a Lithuanian centrist EU lawmaker, said that the EU needs a new approach toward Belarus, which includes the termination of any cooperation with Lukashenko's regime. Now, I frankly don't know that the situation in Belarus is going to stay as it is, because it's going to. I think it's got to move in one direction or another. That Lukashenko is able to retain control, and there have been mass protests since the August elections, which opposed probably the biggest threat to Lukashenko and his attempts to extend his 26-year rule.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, 26 years. You know, it's an awful lot of power, and maybe he should figure out,
Well, it would help if we
do.
know. It would help if we had an accurate reading of the election results, because he claimed an 80% victory. The official elections people in Belarus said was actually 60%, but he still did win. And the shouts of election fraud may be part of the campaign to start a color revolution to bring Lukashenko down and bring Belarus into the Western sphere of influence.
Yeah, I think a big issue in this is just what Putin is going to be willing to do to save his regime or work or cooperate with another regime in Belarus, because they historically have been neighbors and friends, and Belarus has been very pro-Russian. And but I have to wonder just what Putin is going to be willing to do to keep the current president in power. Mike, your thoughts about that?
Well, he's definitely going to work to keep Lukashenko in power, because that keeps Belarus in the Russian sphere of influence.
Right.
And Putin sees Belarus as a buffer zone against NATO aggression, which NATO is certainly demonstrating they're getting ready to do.
Yeah.
And obviously, if Belarus's government is overthrown and they're brought into the Western sphere of influence, that's going to make the Russians even more afraid that ultimately the U.S. goal is to overthrow Russia's government and bring them under U.S. hegemonic domination.
Yeah. I'd like to go over to Venezuela, because apparently the EU has a request to push back the elections later than December 6th. And Maduro said, no can do. This is a constitutional mandate, for heaven's sakes. And the EU is suggesting pushing back the voting to meet conditions for the bloc to send an observer mission.
If they can't organize an observer mission between now and December, then that's a flimsy excuse.
I know. And but I also know that there are elements, if you will, inside the Republican Party that are looking for an October surprise to buoy strength for President Trump. I don't even know if this election is going to be allowed to happen. And I am not sure, hon, if we're looking at some very vile behavior against either Venezuela or Iran, with Pompeo having made the statement that the U.S. will continue the UN mandate against Iran's receiving foreign weapons, even without the UN voting to continue it. But apparently they're looking to do something to energize his base, and something against either government may very well be the ticket. But it's interesting, again, watching the U.S. geopolitical behavior right now. And I mentioned this earlier. It seems like we are pushing alleged enemies closer together with the military and economic tactics we've been using, and the accusatory pronouncements of becoming, more fierce than they ever have been before. So I would not be surprised at some kind of action against either Venezuela or Iran before the elections. Michael, which do you think is more likely?
I would think could be either, could even be both. I know we have warships cruising the Caribbean off the Venezuelan coast here right now, dodging the storms.
Yes.
And but I disagree with the idea that yet another war is going to help Trump, because I see this country as being very war weary, and especially looking at Afghanistan going on 20 years and having utterly failed to accomplish any of its original stated goals. Same thing with Iraq.
Oh, yeah.
I think Americans are tired of war. They're tired of all the money that's being poured into the war machine. They want that money poured back into the civilian infrastructure in this country. They want to get America, back on path to being a modern republic with a democratically elected government. I think they're tired of the infighting and the gridlock. And I think a new war would actually work against Trump.
Yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, there is no 19-year-old young person in this country who hasn't seen the U.S. a day when it's been without war.
That's true.
Hasn't seen it at all. Now, I have a very interesting article on something that we haven't heard a lot about in the West. And this comes to us from the New Arab, the English language edition. Now, it's a blog that I'm just starting to read. I consider it both intelligent and serious. And they're talking in this article about the Moria camp tragedy in Greece. And it's about Europe's failed migration policy.
Okay.
And apparently this was a huge fire, and it highlights the failure of a political calculus designed to create misery. Now, apparently last week, 3 fires started on the outskirts of this notorious Moria camp on the Greek island of Lesbos. And apparently they were fanned by warm summer winds, gathered momentum, and moved inward. And as the fire engulfed makeshift tents and ISO boxes, the 13,000 camp residents fled. Can you blame them? I mean, hello. By the morning, almost all of the camp had been burned, charred to the ground. Now, fires in Moria were not uncommon. Cramped living conditions, flammable tents, and limited access to cooking equipment forced people to use open fires in dangerous circumstances for cooking and warmth. And a 6-year-old kid died from just one of these fires last March. But this was different. And it appears that it was quite deliberate, and it was a material destruction of the camp, which was near total. Now, questions remain as to whether it was lit by protesting refugees or organized far-right groups, and how 13,000 people were kept trapped in this holding pen during the pandemic, despite restless demands to evacuate
Relentless
them.
demands.
Yeah, relentless demands.
Okay.
And the EU migration policy is failed. Now, they interviewed a young lady from Sweden, Anna Benediktsson, 28-year-old lady who has worked with search and rescue and a legal support organization in Lesbos since 2018. And apparently this facility was originally built on an old military base designed to hold only 2,500 asylum seekers in some very basic facilities. And what the EU did was allowed Moria to become a hell in order to stop people from coming to Europe. And the legislation that forced so many to live in Moria can be traced back to the EU-Turkey deal in 2016. The memorandum designated a limited number of hotspot areas to manage migratory flows, and that meant that newly arrived refugees in Greece were required to stay here while their asylum decision was processed. But people kept arriving because of continued violence in nearby countries, and the numbers just swelled, and over 22,000 were crammed into shanty-like space at its height. Now, the EU could have admitted the EU-Turkey deal had failed a number of years before and reimagined their entire approach to asylum reception. But since it was built, the living conditions in the camp have deteriorated. I mean, people, just wrap your minds around this for a second. People spent hours a day in line waiting to get food, 3 hours for food, 2 hours for the toilet. 250 people would be forced to share a single toilet and shower facility. No medical access, no effective access to rehabilitation for survivors of torture, rape, and war. And asylum procedures could also be almost impossible to follow. And this lady talked with a gal who missed her asylum interview because she was giving birth at the time. Hello. The asylum service rejected her claim because she didn't show up, and there was no lawyer available to help her appeal that decision. Now, apparently, the people in power in Greece right now, it's a right-wing New Democracy Party, resumed power in July 2019, and you've seen a marked escalation in anti-refugee rhetoric and policy. Now, Sivash Shahabi is a refugee from Iran who was living in Greece and who is among those who argue that the conditions in the Moria camp have been deliberately designed as a deterrence measure. Apparently, the EU allowed Moria to become a hell in order to get people to stop coming. Now, Greek politics and the far right are again embedded. And since the right-wing New Democratic Party resumed power, there has been a marked escalation in anti-refugee rhetoric and policy. Now, some members of the dissolved neo-Nazi Golden Dawn Party swelled its ranks, and critics argued that greater restrictions on refugees are now being used by New Democracy to distract the electorate from other unpopular measures, And Lesbos and other Aegean islands have been a stage for Europe's far right. In March, a number of far-right and fascist organizations descended on the islands to back protests by locals against plans to build new refugee detention facilities. In the last month, their campaign has escalated again. And just like in March, fascist groups have been back to attack, sabotage, and threaten both humanitarian workers and asylum seekers. Some residents believe that it is groups like this that actually set the fires in Moria. And apparently, when the fire started, on the night of the fire, Mr. Shahabi is recounting, when people fled, the far-right moped gangs were waiting. Some threatened the refugees with guns and cudgels, and the police did nothing to protect them. And repeatedly, the people living inside the camp have protested peacefully. They've written letters, hunger strikes, marches, rallies, all peaceful, by the way. Did nothing. The answer they received was silence and now more tear gas. And Mike, what do we need to do with these issues of refugees who are caught in the crossfire in these kinds of situations?
Well, I playing devil's advocate here, I mean, Greece and these other islands in the Aegean were also caught in the crossfire from these globalists trying to argue that borders should come down and everybody should be allowed to go where they want to go. And it started this huge flood of people, and the nations are trying to deal with it. It's caused all kinds of problems in a lot of different countries. And the ideal solution would be to start sending these people back home and to sort of calm down the wars and everything that are going on in their homes so they feel safe going back home. But we're witnessing one of the largest human migrations since World War II. And that was a problem as well. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And welcome back to our show here. Last segment on this Pow Hunter Friday. And Claire, you have one more story for us, I take it.
Yes, I have a little bit more depth. You were talking about George Soros, the guy about whom you cannot say anything negative, apparently, on television.
Yes.
There is a movement afoot to revoke the U.S. citizenship of George Soros.
Good luck on that one.
Cancel his passport. Now, there is this is said to be sponsored by something calling itself the Radical Republican Party, to President Donald Trump, and what he has been doing to support organizations. Now, I looked it up, and your citizenship may be revoked if the U.S. government can prove that you joined a subversive organization within 5 years of becoming a naturalized citizen. Membership in such organizations is considered a violation of the oath of U.S. allegiance. Now, examples would be Nazi Party and Al-Qaeda. But there seems to be a radical flaw in this law because it says nothing about funding organizations seeking to overthrow the U.S. government. And Mike, in my mind, that's got to be changed, and quickly, because Soros attorneys, of whom he has innumerable, I'm sure, on speed dial, can reasonably respond that he is not a member of an anti-American group, just a funder of many. Do you think
but that puts him in violation of the USA Patriot Act, which says, encouraging or sponsoring violence to change the political system is defined as an act of terror.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, when you've got that much money in political pull, Soros is an untouchable, like the Bush family, like the Clinton family.
Yep.
And I keep waiting for his old age to catch up with them.
Yeah.
But I understand his son is just as fanatical as he is.
Okay. I didn't know he had a son.
I believe that he does.
Okay. Now, I don't like Newt Gingrich or his politics in general, but on this issue, I agree with him 1,000%, Mike.
Yes.
Absolutely. It shouldn't have happened.
And we just got an email from Fox News saying, shut up about George Soros. Okay.
Well, sweetheart, with what would you like to end our show today?
Well, let's see. I like this next story you've got here. Support for Black Lives Matter falls further.
Yep.
Americans see the protest as riots, believes there is a war on the police. And we were talking about some of these polls here. Fox News poll shows more voters consider the unrest in 3 U.S. cities stemming from Black Lives Matter to be riots rather than protests.
Yeah.
And, it's a huge amount of violence out there. The poll was published last Sunday, found that 48% of likely voters surveyed described violence in New York, Portland, and Kenosha, Wisconsin to be riots, compared with just 40% who saw them as protests, and the rest were undecided. A third poll from Rasmussen reveals that 59% of voters believe there's a war being waged on police officers. A whopping 80% of Republicans said it is obvious to them that there is a war on police, compared to 39% of Democrats. In addition, a majority of independents, 60%, agreed with that statement. Previously, in 2018, 43% of respondents believe there's an ongoing war against police. Okay, there's the music. It's time for us to end this show here. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We really need your help to get through this rough patch. Have a really good weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.